Football preview show sponsored by Yolked. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry. Ryan, how are you this evening?
Doing pretty well. A lot of change in New England college football this week,
Yeah.
especially at the FBS schools. So excited to dive into it. We usually don't have like this type of breaking news type stuff. So
No, we don't. And before we do that, I do want to remind you that if you're looking to enhance your workouts and add a solid protein product to your workouts, then you need to visit yolked.com. Yolked is a safe and effective product at only 47 calories per pack. It's tasty. It's made from natural egg yolk. It tastes like birthday cake, and it is a great source of protein. So if you want to enhance your workouts and get more out of them, then you need to get Yolked. Visit yolked.com today for more information on how you can order this great product. Ryan, you mentioned some important news today. Of course, Thomas Castellanos is transferring. He's leaving Boston College. Boston College head football coach Bill O'Brien announced yesterday that Castellanos would be benched for the remainder of the season. Grayson James is taking over as the starting quarterback of the Eagles. In that press conference yesterday after practice, O'Brien also mentioned that Castellanos was going to take some time away from the team. It turns out he's leaving the team as he entered the portal today. And you and I were talking about this before we went live. He was benched on Saturday in the Eagles' 37-31 win over Syracuse, a much-needed win where they improved to 5-4. But this is big news, and it's big news because of the timing of it. Look, I'm not going to get into what this says about Thomas Castellanos. It is what it is. We all have our opinions on what this says about him and leaving the program. I think my bigger issue here, Ryan, is this reinforces what we've talked about for a long time, which is this come and go as you please portal that we have in college football is a detriment to the game. And this is yet another example of that.
yeah, I wasn't surprised to see him, not play because his play has been up and down at times this year. And I think that, if he had transferred at the end of the season without this, I don't think I would have been that surprised.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have been surprised.
He wasn't Bill O'Brien's guy. You look at the type of quarterback that O'Brien coaches, and he had 1,000 rushing yards last year, and he has like 193, I think, to this point in the season. It's a different scheme. So it's not surprising. It's just the fact of how abrupt it is that a simple benching after a pretty rough start to that game against Syracuse, right? And then it's just like, actually, I'm out. So maybe there is a business decision end of it where he might have known that I'm probably going to leave at the end of the season, so I'm just going to stop now to preserve my health, right? But even still, it's just so hard because it's just the wild, wild west. Is he getting NIL money? Is he still owed some with 3 games left or 4 games left? But it stinks, because I feel like this is now a second case where people around college football are going to look at BC and be like, oh, look, it's another issue here. That's because of NIL. When Jeff Hafley left and he was saying how, oh, it's because I can't coach in college anymore. And it's like, I kind of look at him and both Castellanos as a little bit of an asterisk, right? Where it's like, yes, this is symptomatic of college football, but these guys were probably on their way out anyway, right? Like if Hafley had another 6-6 season, I don't know if he would have lasted the season. I don't think Castellanos was coming back next year anyway, in a lot of ways, especially how this year's gone. But I don't know. It just stinks, but especially if you're a BC fan where you thought the season was with him coming in and the great start you had, and you're like, oh, wow, the season's not even over yet and he wants to leave, So I think it stinks, especially if you're an Eagles fan, but at least you got the win. If you had lost, that would have really sucked.
Yeah, and they got the win thanks to Grayson James and him coming in and giving the passing game some juice, and they were able to get the win. And look, I think for Boston College, this is a season saver. It's a season-saving win because Syracuse got off to a really good start. They've been sputtering of late, but this is a big win for this program. Now, they have a tough one this week. They're going to go on the road and win at SMU on Saturday. That's not going to be easy. They then come home next weekend for North Carolina, and they wrap up the regular season at home against Pitt on November 30th. But certainly, to your point, it salvages the season because if you lose this game and you go 4-5, now in essence you have to win 2 or 3 at minimum. Possibly you'd have to win out to be bowl. You'd be bowl eligible, but to be appealing for a bowl beyond the Fenway Bowl or the Armed Forces Bowl, something like that, you'd probably have to win out. You're probably looking at a 6-6 season at best. But getting this win now, they still have a pretty good shot with 3 games left to at least finish 7-5 here. And I think, look, I think that SMU Pitt, they're going to be tough games. North Carolina's playing better. That's going to be a tough game as well. But you hope that this change at quarterback sparks the team and it gives them new life and they can go on a little bit of a run here, become bowl eligible, and play some additional football here at the end of the season. But to your point, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here with Castellanos. Is he going to continue to get NIL money? What was he? Could it be that maybe he didn't get what he thought he was going to get, and so he probably thought, well, if I'm not starting, why stick around? I think the thing that just gets me with all of this, Ryan, is that this is no longer college football now.
Right.
These guys can come and go as they please. Clearly, he doesn't care about his academics. That's not important to him, I would think, because if it were, he wouldn't just get up and leave unless he's already taken final exams and he's in between semesters. But the bottom line is this isn't a good look for him. And again, I'm not going to sit here and judge him on this show, but this isn't a good look for him. But even worse, it's an even worse look for the NCAA because it speaks to just how effed up the portal system is and how it needs to be tweaked at some point. And then I don't know when that's going to happen. It doesn't seem like the NCAA has much of an appetite to do that these days, but they got to figure it out because you can't just have guys quitting programs midway or towards the end of the season and leaving. They should at least have to finish the year out and then they move on. But I do think you bring up an interesting point. He probably wasn't going to be here next year anyway, so I guess you get a jump start on that. UConn, big come-from-behind win over UAB, just when it looked like all hope was lost and they were going to suffer a terrible loss against a bad UAB team. They come from behind and win 31-23 and 7-3 for the Huskies. They have a bye week this week, but what can you say about the job Jim Moore has done there? If it weren't for Cignetti at Indiana, he would get serious consideration for Coach of the Year. And I know there's people out there that are going to say, but they didn't play anybody. They had 6 straight at home. Who cares? It's not that impressive. Say what you want. It is impressive. The bottom line is this program is going to have essentially 2 winning seasons in the last 3 years. This is a program that before Moore got there had 1 win the year prior. So I think what he's done there is tremendous. I think they're in a pretty good spot here, to win at least 8, possibly 9. But you can't say enough about this UConn team. What a big win for them coming from behind.
Yeah, I mean they break a record of consecutive losing seasons. I mean you look at you look at where other teams wish they could be, and it's funny when I see people bagging on them for, well, you're just beating Georgia State and UAB and and Rice. It's like, do you know how many teams would kill for this? Like a team, that's an hour up north on I-91 would love this, right? At UMass, right? Kent State, like these teams would absolutely kill to have this. So if you're UConn fan, you've got to be pumped. I do think there is a question though that might be asked that Nick Evers goes down, Joe Fagiano comes in and does a pretty good job, right? You look at his stat line before he came out, and it really wasn't that great. And I think you're seeing the fact that UConn can still keep winning, even though they're not getting the best play out of their quarterback, right? And I think that's a testament to the rest of the team, and it's a testament to how great that running game is, right? Cam Robinson again, just unbelievable, like how they're able to keep doing this every week. And they get a bye week this week, which is huge. But at worst, you're 7-5. You've got UMass end of the season. You're probably 8-4. This is a tremendous job by Jim Moore. If anything, I'm a UConn fan. I'm starting to worry. Like, hey, if a Power 5 job opens up, what's to stop someone from coming in for a lot of money?
No, I think that's a valid point. We don't want to start speculation.
Of course not. Yeah,
but I think you're right. I think that's a valid point.
Right. I don't want that for UConn because I love the job that Jim Moore's done. But I think it's a valid question. Just it's hard to turn around. You look at what you mentioned, Cignetti. You look at what he's done at Indiana, right? If you can turn around these programs that just struggle.
And by the way, as much as we were complaining just now about the flaws of the portal, Cignetti was able to do what he did at Indiana because they literally turned the roster over.
Exactly.
They brought in like 40 guys.
Right.
And in this era of the portal, if you identify the right guys and the right players to fit your schemes and your culture, turnarounds can happen relatively quickly, unless, of course, you're UMass. But that's a whole different story. Yeah. But in all seriousness, they can do it too. Moving into the MAC next year, If Coach Brown decides to overhaul this roster this offseason, they can do it, especially moving into a conference next year. So, but you're right. I think that, look, one of the things that I think is important to realize with UConn is they did it right. They recognized that in order to compete in this landscape, you need a strong NIL initiative. They did that. They set up an NIL. They promote it. They do a great job with Stores Central. Our good friend Amon Kidway is involved in that. They do a great job promoting the program, promoting the initiative. It also helps that your basketball teams win championships because it's a higher profile program. Guys want to play at UConn because it's a national brand. I'm not saying that UMass isn't a national brand, but it's not at the level that UConn
no,
is.
They're not.
With national recognition. And a lot of that's the hoops programs. But my point is, you add all of that up, plus the facility, you see why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think another important thing, and this is, I feel bad always, if I'm a UConn fan, I probably would hate me because I always bring UMass into the conversation, even though it always makes UConn look good. But and what you've hit a lot of points in the head, and what you can't stress enough too is the state and how much that UConn, that rather the state of Connecticut just backs the program and backs their athletic department, and they invest in UConn athletics because that is their NFL. This is their big thing. If you look at their state legislature, how many of those people went to UConn and want to see UConn do well, right? And that's a huge benefit for them that Massachusetts just doesn't have. We don't have that same type of love because we have a million other colleges that people think sometimes more of before UMass, right? So UConn has that benefit where everyone is just all in, right? And I think that this all in, it can take them a lot of places. Where that will conference-wise with them, I don't know. I know we talked about, weeks ago about the Mountain West trying to get them for football only. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just thrilled for them just to see how well they're doing and just how far they've come, after this blip last year.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that, again, you can have these kind of turnarounds if you have a strong NIL and you have coaches that know how to recruit in the portal. And if you can attract guys to your program and they fit your schemes and they fit your culture, you're going to win. UMass is back in action this week after having a bye week last week. 2 weeks ago, they lose to Mississippi State. They're back in action this week when they host the 6-2 Liberty Flames. And staying with the theme of big quarterback news, you were on Monday. You were one of the members of the media that was a part of Don Brown's presser, where he announced that quarterback Tyson Fulmachon is done for the year with knee issues. So now the Minutemen have to play their final 3 games of the season against Liberty, at Georgia, home against UConn, with either Ahmad Haston starting or A.J. Hairston. Couple of thoughts here. First of all, you and I talked about this briefly before we went live. The timing of this with Fulmachon, and obviously it sounds like this has been a cumulative thing. He's been banged up for most of the year. Were you surprised by the announcement that he's done for the year? And what does this mean for these young quarterbacks?
I was definitely surprised just because, you knew that he's been battling injuries, but just for kind of how abrupt it was, right? Every week I feel like at Don's presser, someone asks like, something about Tyson, and then he just kind of drops that. And I think he did it so casually that I believe Howard Herman from I believe it's the Berkshire Eagle out from Pittsfield had to clarify that. Wait, I'm sorry, did you say Tyson's out? Just to make sure, because we were like, oh wow. So I feel for him. I really think back to that game last year against New Mexico State when they opened, and you're like, oh my gosh, we have a quarterback. We've got our Blake Fronapple again, right? But it never matriculated to what we hoped. And I wonder how much injuries have plagued him this entire time he's been at UMass. I think maybe the same this season. We were told all season, Tyson's great, but then there were times he didn't maybe look as comfortable. Is that just him, or is it not? I'm excited to see Haston and Hairston go. I think that when Ahmad Haston came in a couple times last year, he looked pretty solid. He's got a pretty big arm, and he can run the ball really well. So whereas Hairston's a lot bigger, more your pocket passer, he looked pretty good in mop-up duty against Mississippi State. So I hope to see both of them, because I think that if you're Haston, you're probably expecting it's going to be your job, right? But if Hairston pushes you, you got to prove yourself. So, and I think in some ways, there might be some UMass fans out there who might even be thinking, you know what? I feel for Tyson, and it's been a tough season. But if Dawn had just said we're sitting him the rest of the season, I don't think that many people would have been too broken up about it, because I think some of us are already looking at next year, like, all right, who's going to be the quarterback, right? And if you're someone like Haston who's pretty solid, you got to play him. You got to show them that he means something here, so you don't lose him to the portal like we see so much. So I just feel for Tyson. I think that his time here was definitely hampered by injury, and you wonder kind of what could have been.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it does. I think that when you go back to that New Mexico State game and you talk about his pedigree locally, Connecticut kid,
Right.
coming back to the region to play, then he has that performance against New Mexico State. Now all of a sudden, the temperature changed last year. It was like, all right, is UMass a little ahead of schedule here? I mean, you got a quarterback, dual threat. We know what he is as a player. Could he put this program on his back and carry them to 4 or 5, possibly 6 wins? And it just never happened.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think obviously they must have known all along that he's had some injury issues. But obviously these injury issues are also bad enough now that he has to sit out. But it would have been interesting to me to get a longer look at Haston. I'm not sure you're throwing him in the best situation right now, because as I mentioned, you got Liberty, you got Georgia, you got UConn. Those are going to be 3 games that he's going to have his hands full. This UMass team in general is going to have their hands full. So specifically this week and next. So I think it's one of them, not that they won't against UConn either, because they will. But I do think that it would have been nice to get a longer look at those guys, so you can peer into the future a little bit and see what you have with those guys. Harvard, big win over Columbia. They are in the driver's seat now to win the Ivy League. I mean, Dartmouth still has a shot. They have to run the table and hope that Harvard loses one along the way. But if they both end up 9-1, Harvard will own the tiebreaker, which would give them the league title. But said this to you last week, I'm going to say it again. Can't say enough about the job Andrew Orich has done this year in his first year at the helm. They go to Penn this week, and of course they got the rivalry game. You'll be there for that one against Yale the following weekend. But that Harvard offense, man, it's one of the best offenses in the area.
Yeah, this was my first Harvard game of the season. I usually get to at least 1 or 2, and Jaden Craig was fun to watch. He reminded me, maybe it's over the top, but just like a really talented mobile quarterback. Like, I don't know to the same height, of course, but like a Kyler Murray, just the ability to be mobile and make some excellent throws. Like he was very, very impressive. And you can't say enough about Charles DePrima too, who was excellent running the ball. He caught a touchdown. Like you'd have no idea that he was a quarterback, on the roster the last few years. He was excellent. To me, he was probably the player of the game offensively for Harvard, and kind of playing that Taysom Hill type role. And, you just wish that maybe you can get a few more years out of that, knowing what he can do now. But to me, I think the most impressive was the defense. There than that kind of throwaway touchdown at the end, Columbia couldn't do anything, and any time they even crossed the 50, like there was an interception or, there was a stop on, turnover on downs. It was just, that to me was what was so impressive. I think even Jaden Craig, about 50% passing, struggled a few times. The wind was really ripping around too, but the defense, I can't say enough about. That was probably the best defensive performance I've seen so far this season for New England college football.
Yeah, no, they have been very impressive since that Brown loss. I mean, obviously, it served as motivation for the program. The senior class in particular took it upon themselves. And again, I think this is where Orich, keeping the majority of Tim Murphy's staff in place, that continuity is paying dividends now, because these guys have been around these kids. They recruited them. They know how to push the right buttons and get the most out of them, and it showed. URI, tough loss at Delaware, 24-21. Game they could have won, up 14-7 in the second quarter. They fell behind 24-14. They get a late score. Of course, story of the game early on, quarterback Devin Farrell went down. Hunter Helms came in, played pretty well, threw a late touchdown pass at the end of the game to make it 24-21. Disappointing loss nonetheless. The Rams still have a shot at winning the CAA. They might need a little bit of help, and they still have a pretty good shot in an at-large playoff berth. Schedule sets up favorably. You got Albany at home this week for Senior Day, and then they go up the street to Smithfield to wrap up the season next weekend when they travel to Bryant. They win those 2, they'll end up 10-2, and like I said, they'll be in pretty good position, if not to win the CAA, to at least get an at-large playoff berth.
Yeah, I feel for them because I was a little worried this game was going to get out of hand when coming into it, just because of how talented Delaware is and what they've been doing to teams this year. But to lose by 3, you're winning in the first quarter is, I think, definitely what sucks, especially when you kind of know, too, that the team's kind of on their way out the door. So it's in some ways you're kind of like, should this loss count, even though they're not really, in conference, since they're not going to be here and they're not allowed to attend for the, CAA title. But I mean, Richmond is 6-0, and they're a juggernaut. They're having an amazing season. So who even knows if it's going to matter at the grand scheme of things. But not the best day running from Malik Grant, but it's still impressive because I think this is a game that a lot of people saw them losing.
Yeah. No, and for them to hang around and have a shot to win it late, I think says a lot about where this program is right now and what their confidence level is and what their expectations are. And Jip Fleming was disappointed after the game, and rightfully so. I would be too. But I think a lot of that disappointment is born from the fact that his team had a chance to win that game down the stretch. And despite the fact that they fell behind by 10 at one point, they put themselves in a position to have a shot. And the fact that they couldn't get it done with the ball at the end of the game, Helms throwing a late interception, I think that's what ultimately stings here if you're Jim Fleming and your staff, because you had a potential to at least tie it, possibly even win it if you can manufacture a last-second scoring drive. But again, the Rams have been a tremendous story all year long. It's not, they should take care of business these next 2 weeks. That Bryant game will be tough, though. We know what Bryant is. Bryant is well coached. It's an in-state rivalry game. They should take care of business this week, though. Everything they want to play for is still in front of them. They just have to make sure they can control what they can control, and that's how they perform in these games. A couple of other storylines from D1 college football in the area. UNH has bounced back nicely. They improved to 6-4 with a nice win over Monmouth on Saturday at home. Maine improved to 5-5 with a win over Bryant. Bryant did make that game interesting in the second half. Of course, those two are now on a collision course where they're going to be playing in their rivalry game next weekend for the Bryce Cowell Musket up in Orono. But both of those programs appear to be heading in the right direction.
Yeah, it's good to see that, it always kind of feels like UNH is pretty consistent here, whereas Maine is a lot more up and down. And the fact that game is going to mean a lot for both of them. It could mean whether or not you're finishing 500 or not, right? UNH is secured that at this point with 6-5, but for Maine, right, that can mean something. And they've lost the last couple of years. So I'm really happy to see where that program's been. Like you said, shout out to Brian for making that game closer at the end. But I mean, what can you say about Seth Morgan? How he's just slotted right in there, taking the mantle, and I think done a really good job. And, again, I think over and over, Logan Tomlinson every single week, 10 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown. He's got to be, to me, on that Mount Rushmore of best New England wide receivers. Maybe it's because I'm so much more into it, having watched a lot more UNH football, but he's someone that I should totally think could get a shot in the NFL too. He's just every week so consistent. So yeah, I love seeing these two teams be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Central Connecticut State. Beat Stonehill 21-17 in a hard-fought game in Easton. They have a shot. They host Robert Morris this week, play Duquesne next week. They close out the season with their final 2 games at home. If they win out, they win the NEC and they end up making the FCS playoffs. That would be quite an accomplishment. Now, it's not going to be easy. Robert Morris comes in at 6-4. Duquesne's been pretty good all year. It's going to be tough. These are 2 tough games. But the Blue Devils have positioned themselves now where they have a legitimate shot, if they win out, to find themselves in the FCS playoffs.
Yeah, and I got to give some credit to Stonehill too, I think. 17 points, making it a 4-point game and having a pretty good second half. So, because, honestly, this has been a really, really tough season for Stonehill and to give them a
very tough.
So, yeah. But again, I think, like you said, it comes down to, can CCSU do it? I mean, those are 2 tough games to win back-to-back. You really need Brady Olson to play well. You need Elijah Howard to play well, but hopefully they can, but I'm not sure if they'll be able to go 2-0. 1-1 more, I would put money on, but
yeah, 2-0 might be tough.
Yeah.
And of course, Sacred Heart coming off an ugly 28-7 loss to Long Island. Merrimack was on a bye. The 2 of them are going to play this week for the inaugural Yankee Conference Championship. This is the season finale for Sacred Heart. Merrimack has one more game next week when they travel to Fordham, so this is their home finale. But, I know that this turned some heads in August when it was announced that they would be playing for this Yankee Conference championship. I still haven't exactly been able to figure out what they're exactly playing for. But nonetheless, it gives some meaning to a rivalry game between these two FCS independents.
Yeah, I think the biggest storyline out of this weekend is the apparel that you can buy that says Yankee Conference on the Merrimack website, because I saw it popped up on my Twitter feed and I clicked on Merrimack, it's a Yankee game, and they have literally anything you can slap a Yankee Conference logo on. That's to me the biggest story of this game. I'm literally thinking, who the hell wants women's running track pant Yankee Conference? Maybe there's a demographic out there for it. I don't know. It's still weird how this is even happening, but I'm happy that it means something. So, but if anyone wants to check out
demographics for everything, my friend.
Yeah, there's maybe someone's buying, maybe some, I don't know, local mom from North Andover wants the Yankee Conference running pants. I don't know, but just the random stuff that they were putting it on there, I was like, what the hell is this for? But I'm excited for it. I just think they're both two Catholic schools in New England. I feel like they could have found something else for that, but that name.
Well, we're going to preview it in a sec, so
yeah,
hold some of those thoughts. You are watching the College Football Preview Show, sponsored by Yolked. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by our lead college football writer, Ryan Barry. Do want to remind you that if you're looking to enhance your workouts and you're looking for a safe and effective protein product, well, that's Yolked. At only 47 calories per pack, it's tasty, delicious, and a good source of protein. It's made from egg yolk. So visit yolk.com today for more information on how you can order. Back in my earlier days when weightlifting mattered to me, egg yolks were a strong source of protein for me, and I got turned on to yolk a couple of years ago. Helped me out. I definitely noticed a difference with my workouts, and then I decided to eat some more, and then I didn't notice a difference with my workouts, but it wasn't because of Yolked. Yolked helped. So visit yolk.com today for more information on how you can order this great product. All right, let's preview some games. Now that week 11 is in the books, let's focus on week 12, and of course, we're going to start with Boston College. Boston College hits the road this week to SMU to take on the 14th-ranked SMU Mustangs. Of course, these two teams met in the Fenway Bowl last year, with Boston College coming out victorious. Revenge game for the Mustangs here against a desperate Boston College football team that needs to win to become bowl eligible. Of course, Grayson James will be making his first start in this one. This is an interesting spread here. They're favored. SMU is favored by 19.5. The over-under, and I'm old, is 53.5. SMU's favored in this game by 19.5. I think that's too rich.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen BC lose by that much this season, right? So
no,
I think
that number makes no sense to me. Is Vegas watching college football these days?
It's hard to think so. They're really taking the Castellanos news to heart, maybe, perhaps. No quarterback. And I do think that I'm taking SMU here. I don't know about those points. If I was betting, I don't think I would, but I do think that they're pretty pissed after last year and everyone's saying, oh, we beat you in the Fenway Bowl. So I think Rhett Lashley's got something cooked up for them. I think it's going to be a pretty.
You think BC fans are throwing it in their face about the Fenway Bowl?
You see stuff. It's probably the loud minority, right, of people saying how we beat them. But it just, maybe it was after I just saw a lot of Twitter beef last year after the game. But I'm going to take the Mustangs for sure.
There was a lot of Twitter beef last year after the game. I will say, I agree.
And I remember Kevin saying as much too. So
yeah. So Twitter has beef with Kevin all the time. So that's you.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, give me SMU, but I think I will definitely take BC with those points.
Yeah, I'm going to take BC with those points as well. I think SMU wins, but I can see them winning by 14 or 17, but 19.5, no.
Yeah,
BC's better than that. I think Grayson James is a better fit for them in terms of the passing game. Look, Bill O'Brien doesn't have his quarterback, and I know a lot of people put a lot of stock into who they've recruited and who they have accepted offers from, but Boston College is going to go quarterback shopping this offseason. They're going to bring in at least one in the portal, maybe even two. So I think that the book is nowhere near being closed here. in terms of the future of the quarterback position at Boston College. I think James plays well enough to keep him in it. SMU, I think, is better. I think that proves to be the difference. One thing I will say, though, this Boston College defense, they've been up and down all year, but that front is really, really good. You got Donovan Ezaraku, you've got Horsley, you got Rooks, you got Neto Okpala. They can get after the quarterback. If they can get after the quarterback early and impact this game, Boston College has a chance. That's why I like them as a road dog. Let's see. Next up, we've got UMass, and UMass is at home against Liberty. Flames are favored in this one by 14.5. What's going on here? I know that they've cooled off a little bit. The Flames have cooled off a little bit. I was trying to make a dumb joke there. It didn't go over, though. But nonetheless, the over-under is 52.5. That's your total. 14.5. Do you take Liberty here?
Oh, yeah. Shouting out to, one of my favorite college football pundits, Tom Fornelli, and his Twitter tip of the day, or however he describes it. I did a series of tweets about UMass versus Liberty and how many points have been scored in these games, how much Liberty has won by each time, how much they've outgained them every single time. You can't legally gamble on Massachusetts schools in Mass, but I will be in New Hampshire this week for work on Friday, and I will be definitely taking Liberty there if I was able to do so, because it's just they wax UMass whenever they play them, and it's there's always rivalry between the fans, and this is the last time they're playing, so it's a mobile quarterback, a new quarterback in for UMass. I think it's going to be a really tough game, so give me Liberty and those points.
Yeah, give me Liberty or give me points.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, that's the unfortunate reality this weekend.
No, I agree with you. I think that the quarterback change is going to be. I think that UMass offense is going to get off to a slow start. I think it's going to be a tough adjustment for Shane Montgomery and the offensive staff. Liberty hasn't played well of late. They've slowed down from their strong start, but Jamie Chadwell is a good coach. You mentioned this the last time they're playing. UMass, of course, moving into the MAC. But I think at the end of the day, that's a manageable number. I can live with that, taking them as a favorite there. I like Liberty here by at least 3 scores. I think they take care of business. And unfortunately, I think for UMass, look, you want to see positives here, right? And I'll say this, we talked about this earlier. Don't mess around with this. If you want to take a good look at Ahmad Haston the rest of this season to see if he can be your guy, because there could be another program that could be in the quarterback market.
Right.
If you want to take a good long look at him, then this is the time to do it. This is your opportunity. I know you want to look at Hairston as well, and perhaps maybe he can play in the second half of games if they're trailing by 3 or 4 scores. But to me, you've got to give Ahmad Hassan an honest shot here. Give him a shot, see what he can do, because if you believe after this 3-game stretch that, hey, you know what? We can go into the spring with this dude as our starting quarterback, great. Hopefully he puts together enough of a body of work that Don Brown, Montgomery, and the rest of his staff feels that way. Right. But if he doesn't do that, you want to know that as well. Because if he doesn't put that body of work together, now you know, okay, we have Hairston, we like him, but we're going to have to go into the portal and bring in an experienced quarterback, a la 2 years ago with Carlos Davis. Bring in someone who started games before, who's had some success, and see if he can push Hairston and Haston. We'll see. Nonetheless, if I'm Don Brown, I don't mess around with this. You want to see what you have in Ahmad Haston. So,
yeah,
hopefully he gets that shot. DraftKings still doesn't have any of the FCS lines we're looking for. UConn is on a bye, by the way. DraftKings does not have the FCS lines out yet, so we're going to make them up because that's what we like to do here at New England Football Journal here on the College Football Preview Show. All right, so we're going to go to CAA first, and we've got Bryant at William and Mary. William and Mary favored by 14.5.
Yeah, I'm going to take William and Mary. I don't know about those points though. I do feel like, the last couple of weeks you've seen Bryant play games fairly close. I mean, 12-point loss to Maine, 1-point loss to Stony Brook. I'll take William and Mary here, obviously, but I'm going to take Bryant with the points, just to maybe because I'm being a homer here, but William and Mary coming off a loss, they haven't been looking as great in the last few weeks. So yeah, I'll take the points on that for Bryant.
Bryant's got to get off to better starts. It's really that simple. It's been their bugaboo all year. Defense tends to adjust at halftime and play better in the second half of games. But by then, it's almost too late. And I think that this game's going to play out like the rest of their games have played out. I think William and Mary will get off to a fast start. They'll build an early lead. 14.5 is a big number. This Bryant team has had a propensity for coming back in the second half of games. I agree with you. I think William and Mary wins, but I'm going to go with Bryant here to cover. I could see them losing by 14.
Right.
But I think that they'll play well enough against a William and Mary team that has been scuffling of late that they could keep it closer than, let's say 15 to 17, 21 points. All right, next up we have Stony Brook visiting New Hampshire. Stony Brook is favored in this one by 2.5.
It's a tough game. I mean, again, shout out to Stony Brook because they have been a really, really, kind of downtrodden program before coming in.
It's crazy. What a job. What a job they've done turning that program around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they didn't win a game last year, the season before, one game within it when they weren't. So I'm going to be a homer here. I'm going to go with UNH. Is Stony Brook going to be 6-1 in the CAA? I don't know, but they've been playing good football too. They blew out Albany, but I think the precursor for me is how they just snuck by Bryant. Whereas I think that's maybe more where they might be at as far as trends. I don't know. So this is kind of a coin flip for me, and I always go to the New England school. So give me UNH here.
Yeah, I like UNH as well. You bring up a good point about that Stony Brook Bryant game a couple weeks ago. Bryant could have won that game. It speaks to the kind of year they've had. UNH is playing well right now, and they've got it rolling. It's their home finale in Durham. I like UNH here. I think that they pull off the mild upset here, take care of business at home. They cover that number as a dog, and they improve to 7-4 with a chance to go to Orono next week to finish 8-4 and secure the Bryce Cowell Musket against rival Maine. Maine is 5-5. They're also well positioned to have a winning season. They travel down to Elon, who's 4-6. Black Bears are favored in this one by 2.5.
I'm going to probably kick myself, but I feel like I want to take Elon here. Elon's been playing good football. They beat William and Mary last week, Campbell the week beforehand.
Yeah, the Fighting Musks.
Yes, yeah. So because I kind of thinking this too, because I think, if Maine loses this week, they'll be 5-6, and then that would set up, I have to get to a win against UNH to get to 500. So I'm going to take Elon just for the storyline, and also I think that they're playing good football right now, Elon. So they've kind of figured things out after a tough start.
I'm going to go with Maine here. I think that they're playing really good football here. Got to tighten things up on defense. They didn't play well defensively in the second half of last week's game. But you know what? This to me, they've been one of the surprises of this season. I think that Jordan Stevens, you can't say enough about the job that he has done there, turning that program around. They're buying in now. I think that the program's in a good spot now where it's going to help them in recruiting. It's going to help them in the portal. It's always been a program that, despite its location, has been able to attract talent in the portal. I think this is a golden opportunity for them to finish with a winning season. Obviously, you would like for that to be capped off with a win over rival New Hampshire. But I think they go down there and they get the job done, and they improve to 6-5, setting up a pretty big game next week against UNH. Again, it'll be for the Bryce Cowell Musket. Maine has struggled in that rivalry of late. UNH has had the better of it. But this could be a pretty interesting matchup between two teams that are profiling as being pretty even. All right, I'm going to go over to the Ivy League, and we've got Princeton visiting Yale. Yale is favored in this one by 7.5. Are you going to go with Yale here?
I feel like I've got to. I think that, they're, playing pretty good football. I thought that was a good win. I don't think Princeton's been, playing pretty well. 3 straight losses. Their only win against Brown, in the Ivy League. So give me the Bulldogs here. I'd love to see them coming in, 6-3 into that final game of the season. So give me Yale.
Yeah, these are your older brothers, Princeton Tigers. They're not the program they were a few years ago. I like Yale in this one. I think they covered that number. They improved to 6-3. And once again, they set up a pretty big game next week against Harvard. Now, as of now, they don't have a track to getting a share of the Ivy League title like they did last year. However, if somehow Penn can upset Harvard this weekend and Cornell can upset Dartmouth, then yes, Yale would have a track at getting another piece of the Ivy League if they were to win next week at Harvard. It would be a remarkable story, but you never know. We didn't think it was going to happen last year either. Then all of a sudden, Dartmouth goes down to Brown, beats Brown the last season of the last game of the season. Yale beats Harvard, and next thing you know, you got a three-way tie for the Ivy League title. So who knows? We shall see. All right, Columbia travels down to Providence to play Brown. Brown, of course, playing their final home game of the season. They are 6.5-point underdogs in this one. Columbia coming off a tough loss to Harvard.
Again, I think my homer is going to show. I think every single time I pick Brown, they seem to lose. But Columbia really struggled last week offensively, and where Brown does not struggle is offensively. You know, they score a lot of points, 34, 28, 23, 29. You know,
their defense has fallen off, though.
Right. So, and that's the thing, you know, as much as they've fallen off, I feel like when you look at Columbia's offense, they don't really score a lot of points. You know, 13 points against Yale, 23, three touchdowns against Dartmouth. So I'm going to go with Brown. I just to be the homer. I think it's being their last home game. I think that I don't think they're going to keep, having extending this losing streak here after this, what would be their second straight one of two games. So I'll take Brown.
Yeah, this one's a tough one, but this game is shaping up a lot like that Cornell game did a few weeks ago, where Brown was able to come from behind and win. I kind of feel like this game's going to play out the same way. I like Brown here as a dog at home. I think they finish their home slate with a win to improve to 4-5, and they're on the road next week at Dartmouth with a chance to go 5-5 again, of course, and win 5-5 last season. All right, Harvard hits the road this week to take on Penn. The Quakers are 4-4. Harvard is favored in this one by 7.5.
I think that Harvard defense slows them down. 67 points last week from Penn, which is crazy. But it's the ultimate trap game. It's the ultimate look-ahead game. I think this, to me, is of course just as much as the Yale game is. Like, to me, this is almost like the season, because you prove that you're legit and that you can win in all circumstances against any team, right? No matter what you're facing. So give me the Crimson here, but I'm kind of sweating this one out. Maybe I'm not paying as much attention and waiting just to see that they won afterwards, because this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is going to be a tough one. I'm going to go with Harvard here as well. If you could put money on this one, that's a big number. I might take Penn as a dog, but you talked about Penn scoring 67 points last week. Penn can score. They're pretty good offensively. They have been all year long. It's their defense that's been pretty generous. I think that proves to be the difference here. This Harvard offense, to me, is the best in the Ivy League. I think they'll get theirs. I'm going to go Harvard here, but that number, if I'm putting money on this one, I might stay away from Harvard as a favorite here, because I could see Penn playing them tough enough to play them to within a field goal. Finally, Dartmouth at Cornell, same thing, 7.5 here for the Big Green.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking the Big Green. As far as the points, I would say so too, because I think that, actually, I don't know. I mean, I think it would be like a touchdown win, right? I think it would be like a 27-20 thing. I'm not sure, but I don't like those points. But yeah, definitely give me Big Green straight up over Cornell.
Well, what makes it hard is that Dartmouth doesn't score a ton of points.
Right.
They're not an explosive offense. So I think that's part of it. But they are a program that's good enough to win by 2 scores. I think they do that here. I think they cover that number. They still have a pretty good shot at winning at least a piece of the Ivy League next weekend. I think they improved to 8-1 with a win over Cornell. All right, I'm going to go to the Patriot League here. Next up, we have Holy Cross hosting Bucknell. Tough loss last week at home, 10-7 to Lehigh for Dan Curran's Crusaders. They still have an outside shot at winning the Patriot League. They have to win on Saturday and get some help, but they host a 5-5 Bucknell team that's been pretty good this year. Crusaders are favored in this one by 3.5.
Yeah, I'm going to take Holy Cross, but that was a really disappointing loss last week, especially being at home, and you control your own destiny with that win. And I am worried too, because Bucknell's playing well, 2 straight wins. But you got to secure this one to have any type of outside shot, and hope Lehigh loses the rest of the way. So give me the Crusaders. That's just got to be a letdown loss for Dan Curran's squad. And
just in case you're wondering, Crusader fans, Lehigh's at home this week against Colgate, who enters the game at 2-8. And then they close out their season next week in their rivalry game against Lafayette, who's 5-5. Now, if Colgate can get the upset, you might have a shot here. Of course, Holy Cross closes their season next weekend at Georgetown. So this is the home finale for the Crusaders at Fitton Field. All right, next up we have the inaugural Yankee Conference Championship game between Sacred Heart and Merrimack. Merrimack is favored in this one by 6.5.
Yeah, definitely give me the Warriors. I think especially coming off a really tough loss to Robert Morris a couple weeks ago, and just a really poor showing from the Pios last weekend against Long Island, who we've talked a lot about being a lot better this year, but I didn't get blown out in the way they did. So give me Merrimack here.
Yeah, I agree with you. Merrimack's playing some really good football. They're coming off a bye, so they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. You know, we talk about this all the time, strength of schedule and how it matters and how it helps teams in football more so than any other sport. The better the competition you play, especially earlier in the season, the more it pays dividends down the stretch. We've seen that with Merrimack. Tough schedule to open the season. They played Air Force. They played UConn. They played Maine. They played Dartmouth. Those games are paying dividends now because they're battle tested. They've been able to get through that part of their schedule. They're better off for it. And it's, like I said, it's proven to pay dividends and it's made a difference. I like Merrimack in this one to cover that number with ease. I think that this Sacred Heart team is wildly inconsistent, and I think that that proves to be the difference in this one. I think Merrimack wins this thing by 7 to 10 points, maybe even 14 points. Again, this Sacred Heart offense has been hard to figure out all year. Their defense will play well, but their offense has been hot and cold all year. They'll play well for a 2-game stretch, play poorly for a 3-game stretch. I just think Merrimack's the better team, especially at home. All right, I'm going to go over to the NEC. Central Connecticut State, as we said earlier, if they win out, they win the NEC, they make the FCS playoffs. Unbelievable accomplishment if they could pull it off under second-year coach Adam Lechtenberg. They host 6-4 Robert Morris on Saturday. Blue Devils are 5-5. Robert Morris is favored in this one by 3.5.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Blue Devils here. Like I said, I think that they're going to go. I think that they're going to be able to go 1-1 over this stretch and, make it interesting. It's that last week, kind of like what happened last year with Merrimack and the NEC, where they kind of fell, I don't want to say ass backwards, but that last game of the season against Duquesne ended up being the de facto NEC title game. So RMU kind of struggles at times. They didn't beat Merrimack by a lot. They got smoked by Duquesne last week. So, yeah, give me Central Connecticut State here. I think that they're more balanced.
Yeah, to me, what it comes down to is I don't think one guy can beat 11 guys. So I don't see Robert Morris by himself beating Central Connecticut.
He able to beat the Blue Devils.
He can't do it by himself.
No, he's
going to need some backup.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I agree here. I think that if nothing else, Central Connecticut State, a la Merrimack 2 years ago, I think Central Connecticut State is in a position here to compete for an NEC title. And I think they get it done this week. I like them here as a dog. I think they get it done, setting up a huge game against a familiar foe to New England teams in the NEC when it comes to standing in the way of a conference title. The Duquesne Dukes, who lost to Boston College earlier this year in convincing fashion, but they've turned it around since. But I see Central Connecticut State setting up a big home game next week against Duquesne with a big win over Robert Morris. Finally, final game on the slate for this week, Stonehill at 1-8 visiting Lafayette. Lafayette is 5-5. Lafayette is favored in this one by 14.5.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Leopards, I believe.
They are the Leopards, correct?
Yes, and it's been a tough season for Stonehill. It's going on the road. You're 1-8, and it's But yeah, there's not much more you can say about Stonehill other than shout out to Methuen's own Drew Eason, who saw his first game action last week, 2 of 6 passing, a couple 13 yards or so. So good. Happy to see him. Maybe he's the future. Hope that he's able to kind of grasp that even more. So.
Yeah, Stonehill's done a pretty good job recruiting quarterbacks in the area of late. They got him. They also got a commitment from Walpole's Noah McKenzie a few weeks back. So they're doing a pretty good job recruiting quarterbacks in the area. But I think the bottom line is I think anybody around the program would have told you, when I visited them during fall camp, it was naturally, right? It's fall camp. Everybody was positive. Yeah, we're going to be young in some spots, but we really like what we have coming up. And, we've got some good young talent, and they're going to get a chance to play and develop. Unfortunately, the problem with young talent is if you play enough of it, you take it on the chin. For every underclassman you play, especially if they're freshmen or sophomores, usually in the world of football, if you're starting 8 of them, you're going to lose that many games because they don't have the experience. They're not physically strong enough. They're not fast enough. They're not seasoned enough, and that proves to be the difference. And I think for this Stonehill team, they had some voids at some key spots, wide receiver in the secondary. Yes, they brought back experience in the backfield and the offensive line, but they couldn't overcome some of their shortcomings at the skill positions and on the back end defensively. And I think that proved to be the difference. And that's why they're having the season they're having. And unfortunately, it doesn't get easier for them. They have Lafayette this week, and then they close this. They end their season next week at Robert Morris. The only good news there, it's going to be 11-on-1, so they'll have a shot at beating Robert Morris, who's going to be playing them by himself. So there you go. All right.
It's going to be a weird looking game, but it's going to be tough. Yeah.
Listen, you never doubt Robbie Morris. He's tougher than you think. All right. That joke was stupid. I probably should have gone back to the well a second time, but nonetheless, I did. To all our viewers out there, I'm sorry. Okay, it's 10:30 at night on a Wednesday. What the hell do you want me to do?
Yeah.
All right, final thoughts here, Barry, before we put a bow on this ridiculousness.
Sad. We've only got a couple weeks left. A lot of good games. Again, one more shout out to Methuen. Hope they take down St. John's Prep this weekend. I know that's a tough task. And also to the amazing coverage from all the high school guys here at the Football Journal has just been excellent. So that's my final and parting wisdom. Yeah.
Thanks, man. And I agree with you. It's hard to believe that we're coming down the stretch here. I mean, we have this week, next week, and that's it. Thanksgiving weekend's the last weekend of the regular season as it stands now. Right now, URI looks like the best shot of making the playoffs of the FCS schools. They look like they're in. To me, I'd be surprised if they didn't get in. But they'll represent the FCS schools in Massachusetts. It's gonna be tough for Holy Cross to get in, but Boston College wins one of their last 3. They'll be in a bowl game, so we'll be covering them during bowl season, and of course, UConn will be in a bowl game, and we'll be covering them during bowl season. So we're going to carry this thing into December. We're going to be talking college football into December for sure. All right, well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Serenitas. We'll be back with you next week to preview Week 13, which is hard to believe. Until then, be safe, and as always, get out there and watch some college football. It's almost over. Peace.